So let's start with finding the smallest rhythm figure. So it seems like eighth note covers all the transients. So this is good. So in order to enable elastic audio, if your tracks are collapsed like this, you're not going to see that option. So you need to make sure that they are not collapsed. And then you click here on this slot, and then you select rhythm. And now the tracks are going to become grayed out for a second because Pro Tools is analyzing them. And then if you click here on waveform, you can see the analysis. And this is everything that Elastic Audio thinks is a transient. Kick transients here, snare transients, and so on. So it gives you all those options. And then if you want to start moving those transients around, you go here to warp. Now you have to think of Elastic Audio as something that turns your audio tracks into elastic bands. So you can really stretch everything. So for example, I can do this. And then you see how it's stretching just like an elastic band. And you can probably tell already that what I did is going to generate artifacts. That's not what we want. It could be a cool effect. You can even record this if you want, but let's not do that right now. So you see that whenever I try to move this first transient here, which is the kick, I move everything else, including the very last transient. So what I'm going to do is put some pins on this elastic band to hold it in place. So I'm going to add one here at bar 3, and then I'm going to add another one at bar 11. So you just double click this analysis marker to turn it into a warp marker. And then I'm going to add another one at bar 19, right? This way, when I move things here in the middle, it doesn't change that much what follows it. So in this way, I can protect myself from making that many mistakes. And then it's just a matter of moving things to the grid line. So you can edit this manually. You can do this in slip mode. And then you can just click and drag. And then click and drag. Click and drag. Click and drag. Click and drag. And so on. And this is going to retain some of the human feel of the drums. But if you want to be very aggressive, you can just go to grid mode here, and then it's going to snap to the grid, just like that. Now, one thing that is important is that you click on the analysis marker closest to the transient that belongs to the piece of the drum kit that you want to sync to the grid line, right? For example, if I go to my overheads contain the kick here, right? But delayed. So if I move my overheads to the grid line, then now my kick is going to be a little bit before where it should be. And then it also creates this warp markers here that are in the middle of the transient, and that's going to generate some artifacts. Long story short, always move to the grid line the transient that belongs to the drum piece that you want to add it. So in this case, the drummer hit the kick and the snare at the same time. So you just have to choose one. I'm going to choose the kick. Here, this transient clearly belongs to the snare, right? It doesn't make sense to go to this little waveform here and sync that one instead. This is clearly a snare. So I'm just going to move that one to the grid line. And here, the kick. Kick. Here you have a kick and snare happening at the same time. You have to choose one. I mean, there are other ways you can like click here and then kind of stretch it, but usually that doesn't yield very good results. So I usually just choose one and that usually works. All right, let's keep going. Boom. Added a kick. There's a snare here. There you go. There you go. Okay. Okay. Now, whenever you see something red, that means that Elastic Audio is going to generate artifacts. So Let's just give an example. So that's awful. If you send that to your client, you're not gonna have a client anymore. So don't do that. All right, so let's keep editing. Here's another tricky one. So I'm just gonna move the snare this time. And there you go. It's just like Beat Detective or manual editing. After some time, it gets relaxing. So I'm just gonna edit the first 8 bars here as a demonstration. And there you go. So let's listen to it. Let's see how it sounds. With the click track first. So that's perfectly in sync. And then without the click track, just to see if there are any artifacts. Now, one thing about Elastic Audio is that depending on the amount of time stretching and compression that you apply, you're gonna hear this grainy kind of sound. So that is part of it. If that bothers you, or if that doesn't work for a certain genre because the drums are really exposed and you want them to be very pristine, then manual editing or Beat Detective is gonna work better. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and edit everything. All right, so here towards the end, there's a tricky part. There is a drums fill. So whenever there is a fill, especially a fill that has tuplets, it's better to leave it alone. And what you can do is just sync, for example, the kicks here. So it can sync like the overall bars, but don't dive in that much into the subbeats, because you can end up changing what the drummer meant to do. So let's listen to how that sounds. So that's good, except for the very last note, right? So what I want to say is that don't feel tempted to edit every single transient, like put this one here and that one there, and then that one there, and then that one there, when there is a drum fill. Usually just sync the bar notes and the beats, but try to leave the sub beats alone. And there you go. Now we have the drums. So now I can switch here to waveform. All right.